Happy New Year, assholes, it's Piper. I was going to record a commentary about J.K. Rowling and her horrible tweet, but I'm not in the right headspace for that right now. But I don't want to talk about something nobody cares about, like my 2020 art goals, so today I will be reflecting on the novel I wrote, what my regrets are, and maybe give some insight to other fiction writers. Meanwhile, in the background, this was an illustration that was actually going to be in the final one, and I kind of revamped it in 2019 because my art was pretty terrible, and I was not that great with colored pencil, really. Anyway, there will be no spoilers in this video, obviously. I don't want to spoil my own book. I mean, how could I trick anyone into buying it then? Haha. All you need to know is what the book is about. So, in case you haven't read the book or the description yet, pause to skim if you feel like it, or don't. It doesn't really matter that much. Now, let's descend into my perfectionist mind prison. Cry for the regrets. Let's start with the biggest fail first. A lot of books, they kind of gloss over witnesses. The murderer always seems to find a way to shirk witnesses who would otherwise interfere with the crime, even if the setting is a large city or somewhere you would expect people to be walking by, or even if there are people around shown. No one ever seems to see it. So Cry for the Devil was supposed to answer that question. It was supposed to be about that one guy who's in the wrong place at the wrong time and witnesses a murder. So what do? I make the fucker psychic, and I didn't even realize it until I went back to edit the book. We writers, we have the tendency to give our characters traits that come from ourselves, especially for point of view characters. This makes it easier to get into their head, and I'm a method writer. William isn't actually a big departure from myself. He's a lot more easygoing than me and is as dumb as the plot requires him to be, let's just be honest. He is TSTL, as book reviewers are probably calling him, I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't read the reviews, but anyway. He's dumb, but other than that, our brains work similarly. He inherited a lot of traits that are obviously from me, like my awkwardness, delayed sleep phase. Oh god, I am just so painfully awkward. I just pronounced the word awkward wrong. Kill me. Okay, I'm going off script, okay? One thing I don't talk about much on here, because I'm afraid people will think I'm crazy, is vibrations. Some of you may already be familiar with the concept of clairsentience, aka psychic feeling. You may even have it without realizing it. If you ever enter a room and it just feels off, or you have this foreboding feeling but no reason for it. Well, when I wrote the book, I thought everyone felt this same thing I did, and I have William comment on negative energy and foreboding feelings all the time like it's just normal. So instead of having a guy who just happened across a crime scene, we have a guy who intentionally follows a girl into trouble because he has a gut feeling she's going to get hurt. You had one job, Piper. You had one job, and you f***ed it up. Well, I guess it's not a total loss. It's not plainly obvious, and William never realizes he's doing it. And even though the story takes place in Philadelphia, it is in the suburbs, kinda, in the middle of the night during that huge icy hellscape that was February 2015. It's weird enough that Eretti and Elijah are even out, and you have to read between the lines of the last chapter in order to figure out why they were even out to begin with. As a matter of fact, it might not even be abundantly clear until you've read the last book, which is book 5. This is going to be a 5-book series. Anyway, so I needed some reason for William to follow her since he wouldn't just randomly walk by. It's just not the story I intended to tell was all. Regret number 2. This one is killing me. I might actually hang myself over this. No, I won't, but oh my god. They move into the Constantino Manor on March 3rd. That's winter! That's... Why the fuck? You see, if I could afford an editor, I like to think that this would have never made it to print. Or if a single one of my beta readers actually turned in their assignments. Not that I can blame them. I didn't conduct them well, and that's my fault. People need prodding and reminding, especially when they're supposed to be doing a deep reading of a 600-page book. But I couldn't do any of that, and it's too late now, is what I'm saying. I have to insert some ridiculous rich people shenanigans in one of the prequels to fix this, like importing flowers daily from somewhere warm so they can die for a house no one lives in just to impress the people who drive by. Or using hyper-realistic fake flowers. I mean, he's dumb enough to mistake hyper-realistic plants for real ones, so it's totally in character. Kill me. I mean, I've seen worse in traditionally published literature, particularly young adult literature, but I do hold myself to a higher standard. And Won't Cry for the Devil isn't meant to be the great American novel of the decade. And my only real goals when writing it were just to make people laugh and to make them bond with my characters. That's all I wanted. But I really, really would have liked to have avoided this dumb mistake. Associated illustrations showing spring weather and shrubs doesn't help either, though it's worth mentioning that illustration was actually meant to appear later in the book after the patty wax scene, but I didn't have enough time to even finish that illustration, let alone draw more pictures, and I didn't want there to be huge gaps in the book between illustrations, you know? The price I paid was that there was no ice or snow anywhere despite it being winter, and right after a huge snowstorm. So I keep saying stuff like, I wish I had an editor, but really, I wish I had pushed the release date back. But I already apologized for that, and y'all thought I was overreacting. Ha ha ha. Try to read this book now without noticing the time hole I fucked. On March 5th, William goes on to describe the flower bed in the backyard too, so I did this twice, leaving the Constantino Manor in its own temperate bubble. I was considering releasing a full-color hardback edition with more illustrations in 2021, but really, I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to just delete all the references to the flower bed and act like I never messed up. I already published it, it's too late, the ink is dry. I don't know, that's how I feel. What do you guys think? Change it if I make a new edition or lampshade it in a prequel? Comment below. I do read the comments, usually. I try. Regret number 3. The setting change. Most people probably won't have a problem with this one, I guess, because it's fictional Philadelphia, and most of the rest probably wouldn't have even noticed this if I didn't just now point it out. But I got the geography of Philadelphia so terribly wrong. The reason for this is I changed the setting from my hometown to Philadelphia because of reasons. I have no memory of why I made this change, but my regret isn't making the setting Philadelphia. It's that it didn't start out in Philadelphia. I didn't start out writing it in Philadelphia. I got some horrible writing advice that the book always has to take place in your hometown. That whole write what you know bullshit taken way too far. And the further I went on, the less sense it made that William even encountered this couple. So the reason I changed the setting was probably a bunch of little things, like, what's a billionaire doing living in a small podunk town where there's nothing to do? How can Elijah be a law student when the nearest college is forever miles away? My hometown's economy is too bad for a successful business to arise out of it. And, lots of other little things around that vein. As a writer, you have to consider believability, so I caved in very early on, but the damage from changing the setting was done. There is no motel in Philadelphia within walking distance of a Waffle House, a gas station, and all the other landmarks that Elijah has to hit that night during his body disposal routine. Routine. Bad word choice. It got so bad, at one point I actually had to add a character just to fix a believability issue that I caused by changing the setting. That character is Mitchell Bain, William's old roommate, who's in jail throughout the duration of the book. I added Mitchell because William needed a roommate. There was no way he'd be able to afford a 2-story house rental on his income. It just, especially in Philadelphia, it wasn't gonna happen. I don't think you meet him until book 3, which is a prequel, bringing me to Regret 4. Regret number 4. I feel like this one worked out in the end, but number 4 is still my, actually, second biggest regret. Garden Gate. That's the worst one. Garden Gate. Just shoot me. It's the very first decision I made before I even wrote the first word. I put the story in William's point of view.
And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
Now this may confuse some people. How could this possibly be a problem when the whole point was for it to be about the guy who walks in on the murder? Except the story's not really about him. William is not the titular character. Elijah would have been the better choice. I love writing villain protagonists, and let's just face it, William is more interesting from Elijah's point of view because William gets in his way constantly without even trying. He's like an oblivious roadblock who just wants to chill out and watch TV, but he just keeps getting in the way. Meanwhile, from William's perspective, you have a pretty relatable but ordinary guy who has relatable but ordinary hobbies and has a relatable but ordinary world outlook, very much a centrist on pretty much every issue, doesn't care. And, I don't mean to shit on characters like that. I mean, I am a character like that. Am I even real? But I enjoy writing Elijah more. And I have from the beginning. So you may be thinking, Piper, if you felt that strongly about it from the first chapter, what the was holding you back? Actually, I wrote the last chapter first. But anyway, love scenes. Elijah has an intimate partner, Eredi Constantino, starting at the beginning of the novel. I have very little romantic experience in real life, and the catalyst for the Great Bender of 2015, during which I wrote this book, was a painful feeling I mistook for heartbreak. It's a long story and it involves my calculus professor, so it was super fucking sloppy, and it was a hot mess, and it was horrible. And, I had no clue how to write love scenes, because Elijah may be a bad guy, but his affections for his girlfriend, while twisted and obsessive, are also genuine. So I put it in William's perspective so I wouldn't have to write any first-person feelings, only to give William a casual romantic interest aside from being the third wheel anyway. Why did I do something that stupid, you ask? I don't know. Why did I write this book to begin with? I was drunk and I hated myself. How's that for an explanation? That's probably how I fucked up the flower bed, too. Too busy hating myself to notice that spring doesn't start on March 1st. I'm so mad at myself. As the series expanded, I at one point decided to fix this by starting over at the beginning of the story, the real beginning, with Eredi's mother Simone's origin story and Elijah's broken childhood. And then I would write 4 books, with the last one being Cry for the Devil, but in Elijah's perspective. I thought including William's perspective did more harm than good because the story was a mystery, and the prequel series was a drama. A sudden genre shift like that would be jarring and would disappoint readers probably, but there was a problem with that plan. It meant discarding years of work, for one thing, along with all the good parts that are unique to William's perspective. So I reworked Cry for the Devil from a mystery, though it still does contain a few mystery elements, but for the most part I deleted them all, and turned it into a psychological dark dramedy. I mean, William was a terrible sleuth anyway. And then I arrived at my final decision. The subsequent 3 books will be prequels, with the final book being an equal in alternating perspectives between the main antagonists, Eredi and Elijah. So it takes 4 books to catch up with the cliffhanger William leaves at the end of Cry for the Devil, but that's a small price to pay if that's what it takes to tell a good story. I know it's convoluted, but trust me when I say that it's best this way. The books will all be written in a way so that they make sense no matter what order you read them in anyway. You can even skip book 1, which after finding out about my flower bed mistake, I'm about ready to disown that book entirely. The only real drawback to organizing it this way is that there's less tension in books 2 through 4. Because you already know Simone is going to die in the end, and you know what she does that I can't talk about anymore because I'm tired of getting ad restricted by the YouTube police. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, because it keeps the tone from getting too dark, since this series is intended to be a dark comedy, not an unrelenting trudge through my worst nightmares. Maybe it's the best, Book 2 will be a really hard read for some people, and I know this because it's been hard for me to write, and yet kind of therapeutic at the same time, cathartic even. It is very, very graphic and uncensored. So the book order is weird, but it all kind of works out for the better in the end. It's still a regret, because if I knew everything I knew now before I started, I would have started where the story starts, not 2 decades later. Granted, when I first created Simone, she was just a throwaway plot device who only existed because Eredi couldn't give birth to herself, and I had no idea Simone's story would end up being more interesting than William's. Or at least I think it's more interesting. I'm a pantser. I just kind of make things up as I go along. Of course, now there's an outline because I have to write prequels, so I have to keep track of everything. But when I wrote book 1, there was no outline. I was just making stuff up as I went along. At least I can take comfort in knowing that William's perspective sets the tone of the series and isn't completely useless or worse, boring. because if you start from book 1 and read them in the order I end up publishing them in, you'll slowly discover William's observations and receive or figure out the answers to questions he had in book 1. Since he and the other 3 narratives, Simone, Elijah, Aretti, are all unreliable narrators, I now feel like having everyone's perspective on the issues is necessary for the story's mysteries to be solvable. William is especially bad at interpreting his own story because of his attachment to his captors, whereas Elijah knows exactly what he's doing to the poor kid from day one. I'm sure a casual reader could speed read the whole book and miss how obsessed William is with them and the toll it's taking on his life, because we're so used to characters telling us the story in hindsight with access to the full picture, in past tense. But Cry for the Devil is in present tense, so that hindsight is 20/20 benefit just doesn't exist. I admit that I do sometimes worry that impressionable people who don't read deeply will seek out these sorts of relationship dynamics in real life, not realizing that William is actually a bundle of denial, anxiety, and thirst. Maybe the last one is the least of his problems, but, or not seeing that it's only okay to root for Elijah and Aretti as a couple because they're fictional characters. And, some things that are okay in fiction are very not okay in real life. But that's a video for another day. Most authors, I don't really think, talk about this stuff, as far as I know. So, I don't know. Oh fuck, I never finished this script. There's no conclusion. Well, let's close with some positive affirmations. My book is selling well. Nobody will notice. Garden Gate. Everyone will forget Garden Gate. Nobody cares about Garden Gate. It is okay to make mistakes sometimes. I can't believe I'm crying over this. Oh my god, I'm actually crying. That was the sound of my soul leaving my body.